I've always had a really deep passion and connection for ecology and nature, and this has made its way into my work over the years. And I think what happened after a practice of about 25 years of delivering work, that there started to be more and more of I suppose what I call it my kind of existential angst as to what the state of the world and the ecology is, which I think most of us probably feel on a regular and more regular and pressing basis every day. And as part of that feeling and need that you have as an artist, which makes you feel uncomfortable or comfortable about things, is that you need to act on these things. So my first reaction was to try and make work about climate change. But when you look at that, you automatically feel, for me anyway, that it was such a huge subject to deal with that I just felt like a rabbit frozen in the headlights in front of something that was so huge and depressing. And so I started to look to an exterior point within myself as to what actually my passions were, and to think about the things that make our lives rich and worth holding on to and saving on a daily basis. And one of the symbols from that, the symbol of that was the place where I live, and which is the west coast of Wales in the Dyfi Valley, which is a UNESCO biosphere and an incredibly special place for both people and biodiversity. And within that space, there is an RSPB reserve called Ynys Hir. And one of the first things I started to do within my climate change research was looking at ways that I could express ideas of sea level rise. And I soon realized that actually that water rising in the estuary was flooding into a wetland where there was this incredible bird reserve. And I started to think about how we could take people into that bird reserve and celebrate the beauty, delicacy, fragility, and wonder of those things. So in order to move my message from my heart to the outside world, I decided I needed a symbol of faith. And partly as a result of working with Kathy, who's had a much longer history of working with bird-themed works, various different ideas started to emerge for the creation of sculptures and a larger scale piece of work which would not only celebrate birds but would also, within that, touch upon the underlying subtext of anxiety that I feel about that. So
I'm going to stop you there, because that's a tantalising moment to stop you. But you mentioned there that, Kathy, you in your practice you've got history of working, being inspired with birds. So maybe you could tell us a bit of your sort of prehistory before the moment of getting to Ynys with Jony for that first time that For the Birds came together.
Yeah, well, I think there's quite a lot of similarity I kind of really connect with what Jony was saying there. And my background is always wanting to kind of combine artistic disciplines, visual art and music, experimental music, and work in collaboration. So I spent a lot, the first sort of part of my practice, working very much with experimental music with visuals or live art and theatre, creating parts of shows. And I realised that what I was bringing to that was hugely informed by wanting to bring field recordings or to find rhythms in nature visually. And so that took me through that process, spending time focusing on maybe the smaller, more subtle details of the world around us. And I think then within my own practice, I wanted to, again, try and that process brought me closer to being more connected with the environment, and I found that was like really, really important. And I wanted to sort of find a way that my practice could share that experience. So I was kind of coming from trying to create work that opened up and revealed maybe the everyday things that are around us that are really beautiful, that we should value. So I kind of wanted to make work that brought people closer to nature in that way. And I think meeting Jony and doing some projects with him, I then started to bring those works into an outdoor context. And I think that the combination of those factors, so bringing people to work that's inspired by being immersed in nature to then actually experience it in the outside world, I think adds another, kind of layer.
Yeah, thanks. So let's get back to that moment of, your home place in terms of the Dovey Estuary and Innislas, and how did you then? What created there, and that then has gone on this continuing journey
with some help from Arts Council Wales and National Theatre of Wales as well, who were very enthusiastic about working with us on this project. But of course, we had to overcome a number of environmental, concerns that light and sound pollution would affect the actual bird reserve itself, which of course is quite a obviously an incredibly important place. So it was a great learning curve of how we present ourselves and our work, because I think a lot of the time people's impressions of the work that we get until they've actually seen it is that I think one of the greatest pieces of feedback that I've had from somebody is that in a piece of social media where they said, I didn't know what to expect when I went along to see this work, and after I'd seen it I realised that nothing in my imagination could come close to actually thinking about, actually imagining what that is. And I think that's a beautiful accolade to have for the work. So the communication thing is a very important thing for us, and we've ended up doing a lot of mitigation as part of our work in order to make sure that we're not affecting the wildlife that we're trying to celebrate and nature we're trying to celebrate as much as possible. So bat risk assessments, the first one I've ever done of those, and also working with Natural Resource Wales in order to reassure them that what we were going to do wasn't going to make a heavy footprint. Did you have anything to add for that?
Well, I was just saying it's something that we discuss, is the kind of tension of making work that uses materials that is actually attempting to bring people closer to nature or highlight issues that are troubling the world and the earth. But I also feel like, we have these skills and this experience and this ability to put together shows that can bring people to a place in their imagination or in thought. And I think that, that's where we can actually, do something positive and, communicate. And it has to start with us coming together. And so, it's one of those things that we're always thinking about.
I mean, for me, there's always an inherent and constant dichotomy between myself as a human being living on this planet and consuming resources and moving with, size 9 boots and walking, trying to tread lightly on the earth, but at the same time trying to reach as many people as possible with a very positive message of change and a celebration of all human and both the conviviality of being with a group of people on an evening, and that's exactly what these festivals are all about. So I love that feeling of drawing people together, and when you have a unique experience that people are all experiencing in a very personalized way, but all together, there's something very special about that. And I think that's what festivals and work where we can deliver very small moments to a lot of people is a very unique thing that we've created. One of the things I found troubling about, for me, doing large scale work was the fact that it always had to be large or always had to be up high. And I think what we've achieved in For the Birds is the ability for people to see very tiny, small details, but a lot of people can see those things as well. And were we not in July, so if we've done this show in November, for instance, we could start at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and run for 7 hours, and then we would be able to reach many more people. But this is the practicalities of summertime.
And just so from Innislas, I know I was lucky enough because I was on my 50th year special trip to New Zealand, and it coincided with you presenting the work in Wellington, where in March 2016, and I know for our festival director, for Monica Ferguson, in May last year, she and Alison Young, our other programmer, were lucky enough to see the work in Brighton. I saw it on a lovely balmy evening in Wellington, and I know they saw it on a lovely, really wet night in Brighton. So, But I think after that, and after Alison and Monica had seen it, and obviously I'd seen it and experienced it, we were talking, and the festival, we've had a history of presenting sort of larger scale spectacles, things from Illitopy on Willen Lake to As the World Tipped, and I think we'd both been very taken with the work, and exactly what you were just saying in terms of the intimacy that you can get with it, but it's still a large form, and you can't gather, it's not about gathering 5,000 people together in one place at one time, but over, 8 nights of performance, we hope that we can get 5,000 people to see the work. So we felt, okay, instead of doing one of these really ginormous spectacles, let's, work to try and get this up in Milton Keynes. And of course, we can't do that because we can only do that with our partners and of course working with the Parks Trust. So I think it was probably in about June of last year that Monica and we came and had the first meeting with you, Julie, and with David, the chief executive of the Parks Trust, and came with this idea. And it might be interesting to hear from the Parks Trust perspective is why it was of interest to you to jump in and to work with us, and we knew it would be a journey to get to this point where we are now.
It has been a journey, but we always welcome International Festival bringing projects our way. It's always interesting for us to see what Monica and Bill and the team have discovered, and things that are a really good fit for the Parks Trust, like this project, really excite us. So we are an independent charity, and we actually have 3 charitable objectives that I don't know that many people realise. So one is to obviously look after the parks in an amazing way, which hopefully I think you'll all agree that we do. Our other objectives are actually around environmental education and providing leisure opportunities. So actually this project combines all 3 charitable objectives for the Parks Trust. This is an opportunity to celebrate the environmental education that we have in Milton Keynes. We have a wealth of environmental opportunities, and not only the ancient woodlands, but a young woodland like Stone Pit has some real valuable ecological importance that we'd like to celebrate and show people. Not many people know about the woodland there, even though it's young. And that magnificent quarry at Linford Manor, that's actually a geological site of importance in Milton Keynes, and hardly anyone knows it's there. So a project like this really helps us to celebrate that, to show people that those assets are within our estate, and to help people discover what's on their doorstep, really.
And the other key person from the Parks Trust that you and David said that we must work with, and actually we worked with most for the first few months of trying to find the right place, was Martin Kincaid, who's your biodiversity officer, and I think that was just such a good decision of you to actually, in a way, say you've got to work with Martin to find the place. And it might be interesting to hear from you and perhaps from Jony's perspective, having that relationship there to find the right place.
It was an exploration to find the right site that would work for both the project and also, for the residents of Milton Keynes and the wildlife. And at first, Martin, as our biodiversity officer, was a bit sceptical. He loves International Festival. He actually comes every year. So he was quite excited that there was a project he could get involved with. But he is very passionate about the biodiversity that we have within the city, because actually it is really important. It's really important that we take care of it, that we protect it as well as celebrate it. But he was very keen. And once he'd spent quite a bit of time with Jony, I think you built up quite a rapport, actually, and he was really impressed with your knowledge, and I think that really helped the journey that we've come on to find the right place and to see it sited at Linford Manor and Stone Pit.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, one of the absolute joys of this job is to travel around the world and the UK. And as soon as I arrive at a place, I usually find that there's some amazing horticulturalist or ecologist or biodiversity officer or ornithologist or something that I can kind of spend the day with. And it's kind of like, you couldn't even begin to pay for that sort of experience, really. So actually, I sort of had pretty much Martin to myself for quite a few days. We'd be walking around various different places and playing, spot the tree, or like, what's that, Martin? And then he'd sort of like, oh, I'm not really a man, sort of thing, or I'd, and then he'd sort of fill me in. And that sort of knowledge for me has always been part of my passion and part of my life. I mean, I pride myself on planting 1,500 trees a year within the valley that I live in, and so I'm taking the profits of my art to plant trees, and creating habitats for wildlife as well has been part of my practice as well. I've done regeneration of cold fields and stolen corners of intensive agriculture to put ponds in as under the subterfuge of art. So all of those sorts of things have been a real, and also I get the privilege of hanging out with Kathy, who knows way more birds than I do. Like.
Oh no, I think you've overtaken.
No, only in the New Zealand.
Just again, for you out there, is that after the next question, I'm going to open this up to the floor. So I'm sure people have a few burning, interesting questions. So just get those formulated whilst we have this next question. So through that process of working with the Parks Trust and particularly working with Martin, we got to the final site, which we had a final few days of you walking around saying yes, yes, yes. And then you do that. You're working with a group of 5 artists. You're making that decision. But then at that point, I think it wasn't until, you send them pictures, Google pictures, and all of the descriptions of the site, the historical documents and all of that we got about Limford Manor and Stone Pit Wood. But then it was April, wasn't it, that we had a 2-day site visit with the whole artist group. And I just wonder how that is for you, Kathy, when, we've had 9 months to that point of getting to the point, and then you come in with Ulf and Mark and Pippa and with Jony, and you're presented with the site for the first time.
Well, we really trust Jony to kind of know where it's going to work. But what's really fascinating is how many times have we done this show now? 4? Is it 4 or 5? What's actually beautiful about it is it's different every time. And so when you come across a new site, it's really exciting because you've kind of got all the installations and artworks in your mind. And then we spend quite a lot of time walking around, and we go around at different times of day. And at the beginning, it's sort of, you have to start thinking, oh, it's not like how we did last time. How are we gonna make this work and stuff like that? So then, but as time goes on, when you start imagining certain pieces in certain places, it really starts to build a picture. And what's really amazing is it just starts to kind of formulate, and we do that very collaboratively. But when you start to have pieces in slightly different orders because of the way that you feel it's going to work in that location, it can actually reveal different meanings and different sort of mini narratives within the show. So, it keeps us really interested because it is different every time. And I think also what's great about this particular site, as Julie was saying, is that we've got this beautiful woodland and some open space, and then this really old quarry section. So we've got this variety, and I think we're kind of always looking for a variety of spaces to set the work off in different ways and to try and create these different connections between the pieces and how people kind of come across them. So yeah, it just, and then as we start to spend our long days setting it all up, it gradually starts to take shape and becomes, a new show. And then you're kind of like, how could it be any different? It's just so wonderful that to be in this location. So, it's great to have pieces that keep, rediscovering themselves.
Thank you. So, has anybody got anything they'd like to ask? If you ask the question, I might well repeat it because just to say to everyone, we are recording this, and it will become part of the digital legacy of the festival, the talk. So, you know, we've got us 20 people here, but we hope after the festival other people will be able to enjoy some of these reflections that we've got. So I'll probably repeat your question, but thanks for that. I think perhaps going back to the quote that you gave just now, Jony, you know, it is that thing of how do you describe this thing that you know, sort of resonates in people's imaginations in different ways. You know, it's something that I know that we've tried to, I know, definitely work with some of the images from the piece. You know, is that pictures can sometimes tell what words actually can't tell when there's something that's delicate and complex like this. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's partly the question at a party that I kind of dread. So, what do you do, sort of thing? I'm an artist. Oh, you're a painter. Yeah, that'll do, sort of thing. You know, because it is a little bit beyond the imagination. Because if you say sound and light show to most people, they just think lasers and moving flashing lights and smoke. And if you say installation, most people haven't got a clue what you're talking about. They think you're going to, I don't know what they think you're going to do.
In.
Yeah, put some plumbing in. And then if you join all of those things up together, and I think it's really hard to, even if you had 1,000 words in the program, and I mean, it's always tight to try and find those snappy sound bites, and we can use the word immersive, or we can, but that doesn't mean anything, does it? So.
I was thinking more about saying something about what you were trying to say.
Yeah, I think it's difficult with a program in a program with you want to try coming to Wales when you have to do it bilingually, and then you have literally half the number of words in your count. So I'm always doing that, and so like I've got a new show that I'm trying to do the copy for, and the Arts Centre said you have 60 words, and that's literally how it is, unfortunately. So, but we will try and hone that copy down to in order. If you would like to send us any descriptions, if you are of a literary bent and you have any suggestions for the next time to sum it up, I would love to hear those. Yeah.
And I think it is actually very lovely now that there are all sorts of descriptions that are banding around through people tweeting or Facebooking or putting through, or when they Instagram a picture, putting a few words with it. So I know we are in the process now of the communication continues. The work, we have another 6 nights of the work. So that's a job for all of us to pick up and communicate with the words that you feel will be the right ones. Any other questions on the floor? Yeah, I'll repeat the question. It was a question about how the work relates to other light and sound installations that are being done in outdoor locations. Is that fair enough? Yep.
Well, the genesis of this project came from a project actually that was touring worldwide about over 10 years ago, called Power Plant, which was more of it was less narrative driven or focused, but we worked in botanical gardens around the world to sort of do this, and that's kind of where the form was sort of evolved from. And in fact that actually goes back to a piece of work that we did 20 years ago in a park that was inspired by Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, who created a multi-stage piece, and that was the first time, as a young artist, that I'd ever seen anything like that, where you realized, oh, I don't have to work in a smelly club and come home smelling of cigarette, because that was, to me, that was where you would go and present your art, which was either in a club. That work was then, I started taking that work to emerging festivals that didn't, at that time, we're talking greenfield festivals who had music on, but they had very little art and performance and installation. And so that sort of burgeoned, and that allowed us to explore those ideas in those outdoor spaces and start dealing with all the problems of, oh, it's raining, everything's made with electricity, sort of all of those sorts of things, and also just exploring the form and that idea of gentleness as well, or detail and small things. So of course there's a great legacy of large scale productions and companies that are doing that, from giant elephants to huge firework explosions and things. So we've kind of rode back from that, and I guess that's where our legacies come from. So I don't know whether that was anywhere near to answering where you come from. And for me, the next big thing is trees. So that's my. Kathy, have you got any?
I think you answered that pretty well.
So the question was, the site that we've got here, we have a redway, and it's a national cycle. It's part of the National Cycle Network that runs right through the middle of the route that people take. So we haven't closed that. We haven't wanted to close that. So people using that can actually walk through the spine of the route, but it doesn't have. Then there's lots of other areas where the installations are, and the question, I suppose, is, have you done that anywhere else, and how is it doing it here, where you have that mix of public walking through as well as the sort of more private spaces? Kathy.
I'm just trying to think if we've done that anywhere else.
I'll jump in. Well, everywhere actually. I mean, there isn't a space that we haven't done our show that isn't been a public space. They're always, for every single show that we've done. I mean, actually, in here, you have to pay £5 to, as part of the RSPB sort of entry fee. But seeing as that was in October and in the middle of nowhere, you got kind of used to it being your own private nature reserve anyway, because it's such. I mean, it's 1,500 hectares or something anyway. So, but there is. You get a real picture of how people use, in inverted commas, the countryside, because we're very much in a sort of blurred edge between, or there's the sort of public space, So we get to cuddle a lot of dogs, which is quite nice, and it can be a great way of mating people, unless they're professional dog walkers, and they've got 15 dogs on leads in Brighton, which was the space we were working on, and that had its challenges. People have a real ownership of space as well if they use it regularly. So as soon as you start, the communication is hugely important, and so we actually act as our own advocates in those spaces a lot of the time, because no matter how much publicity you get out to a place, some people don't often read things, and it doesn't often get through. So we probably spend about anywhere between 10 and 25% of our working day actually just trying to give that information over. So it's great that we have leaflets. And we had a problem in Brighton that it was supposed to be a secret location, and I think that was a huge mistake, because the users of the site weren't brought in on the loop with that, and so we ended up creating a problem for ourselves. Well, there was a problem created with that perception there. But
Kathy, and then I'm going to come to Julie on this as well.
Well, just adding to what Jony's been saying, I think during the installation time, when we're putting the work up in that place, we met probably all the residents of Churchleys, which is the row of houses that back onto the Redway. And so, we're meeting them and they're like, what you're doing. And so we're starting to gradually explain. We're really getting to know people who use that woodland every day, walking dogs or going for walks. And it is, it's a really important part of the process, this being chance encounters with people that are there anyway. And then we actually met those people again at the show and the day after. And I think what's really amazing and magical is that it's kind of, what did you think? And it's like, we've been watching us doing strange things in the woods, and just to get their responses, and also to sort of allow people, or just make an opportunity for those people to see that area they're so familiar with in a completely different way, because you wouldn't go and walk your dog at, midnight in the woods because it's completely dark. And so by creating this space in a very familiar space, I think it's really interesting to hear people's responses, and they've been really positive. And also a particular family that we've been meeting nearly every day came to the show, and we were like, "Oh, what did you think?" And they were like, it's just they were kind of a bit flabbergasted, didn't really know what to say. They were like, it was really unusual and really imaginative, and So I think it's exciting to possibly invite people into sort of the kind of work that we're doing that may not necessarily opt to go and see a work that's described or however we might describe it. So it's a great, and I think this putting work in public space outside of a gallery context, we're all very passionate about. It's kind of open to everyone, and the show's very accessible, and it can be read in lots of different ways. So yeah, that's what we're kind of aiming for, and that's one of the joys of being in public space.
And Julie, any thoughts on this, and thinking of some of the community consultation process that we went through together?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge in working in the public realm, and we have our 6,000 acres, and we're always trying to work and put various things on. A project like this definitely has its challenges, and right from the outset, engagement was our key, really, with identifying the local residents and communicating with them, and we spent some time doing that. Those regular users, and I have to say, once the team came in to set up, and from there onwards, just engaging with all those park users, I had complete admiration, because I was watching you all, every single one, cuddling those dogs, and that means so much to people. It really does, because you're building that rapport, and it makes all the difference for having a show in a very different place, in a place that we'd not animated in this way before. Just feel really comfortable, and making those residents and those regular users and just regular members of the public feel really comfortable with what we're doing with this space that's so different. And taking it to them is also, it's really exciting for me, when we hit upon this site in particular, to animate this space and to take it to the residents who wouldn't, some of them probably hadn't engaged with a project like this before, and yet they were able to come and see it being installed, and then they came on the night, and then you were able to talk to them the next day. I mean, where else would you be able to do that? I just think it's really exciting. A real testament to the project and the sort of the barriers it can help start to break down, really.
And of course, that also relates to you've had a focus on the development of Linford Manor, and I don't know if people know this news. It might be worth sharing, and how that links with the project happening these 2 weeks.
The project is really timely for us. It's another reason why we're really excited about it being in this space, because we've been working on a Heritage Lottery Fund project, and for the last 2 years we've been working on phase 1, because actually Linford Manor Park, Great Linford Manor Park, is actually an 18th century manor gardens, much of which was designed by Richard Woods, who was a contemporary of Capability Brown. So there's some really exciting features that we've been exploring in this phase 1 of the last 2 years, and we have just received phase 2 money. So we've got £3.1 million to spend over 5 years on bringing back some amazing features that have been lost, and to help us really discover and really start to manage a really important piece of heritage for Milton Keynes. And this project is starting to open those doors to some of the residents that we haven't been able to reach as yet, even though we've done lots of consultation. A project like this helps break down some of those barriers where, a very formal consultation would not be appealing for them. So it's great for us as a Parks Trust. Yeah,
it was great to hear that news. There is just time if anybody has it for one more question, or that we got 2, so maybe we could probably do 2 quick ones, I think. Yeah. Question, and then we've got one other question, then we will finish, which is in terms of work in actually the urban environment rather than work that's in the natural or the naturalised environment, and that can still sort of celebrate the natural environment. I think, say, the lovely Whitebird piece, I think that's a piece that you originally made for an urban space, isn't it? That now is obviously in a woodland.
Yeah, the piece that I have in For the Birds that I have actually toured into town centres and put in an urban context, and yeah, it does change it. But with that piece, it was originally made for Kidderminster Arts Festival, and they were going through a process of redesigning this particular part of the town and trying to reveal the river and do more tree planting and try and create this softer edge between the urban and the rural, because it was, you know, very separated. And so this was before that was happening, and I wanted to put this flock of birds flying down the high street to sort of signify this change of kind of trying to make that softer edge between the natural and the urban. And I have toured that piece to different locations, including it was particularly showing it in Glasgow was particularly special, actually, because we put it in an alleyway that was not in the city centre, and we kind of cleaned it up a bit and put it somewhere that maybe people wouldn't sort of walk through at night, and it was, you know, a bit more of a kind of corner of the city. And the feedback that I got from that, from people, was you know, thank you very much for putting it there, not in the city centre. It's really great to have this work that people come across by chance, and it kind of made people in that area feel like that they were receiving something as a kind of gift. And so, yeah, that answers the question about.
Thank you. And last question. This is a question about their secrets, I think.
Yes,
how is it done technologically?
I mean, I could. Well, I think between me and Kathy, we could keep you entertained in a room for several days with the. As this is pretty much what we do when we go home.
Really fascinating evening discussions.
A fascinating evening discussion about the resolution between a Raspberry Pi and an Arduino version 1 sort of thing. So yeah, we have a lot of things that turn things on and off. That's one of our specialities. So, and lots of things that make things go round. But behind that actually is some quite sophisticated sort of electronics. And I mean, we're blessed to be living in the age where you can literally fit a really powerful computer in the palm of your hand, and put it in a little waterproof box and put it in the forest, and then it throws up all sorts of magic, which actually belies the simplicity of it sort of belies the complexity, and vice versa. And you'll see in other situations, it's is an incredibly analog and basic kinetic. You know, a motor goes round and it hits something, and then it creates something, or it moves something. And so we oscillate between those two things. And then we have things as simple as 40 birds carved out of oak and painted and charred, and they sit there just being like a flock of crows. So our technology goes from really sort of, you know, I always say one hand on the mouse and the other in the earth. And if you see my computer keyboard at home, it's encrusted with mud because I'm constantly flipping between those two things. I can't even read the numbers on it now anymore. So yeah, it's very much we are celebrating the hybridization of this. I mean, I started out in the land art movement in the 80s, sort of working in the kind of hallowed halls of Andy Goldsworthy and those sorts of places, but because of my passion for technology, I then started to try and pioneer the use of sort of solar energy and putting simple technological things into forests and in incredibly robust spaces. Some of which are still going 20 years later, much completely to my surprise as well. So yeah, but do feel free to come and meet us if you're down on site, and we can get really nerdy if that's what you're up, you know.
Thank you. And I'd just like to thank you all. I'd particularly like to just thank the Parks Trust for going with the International Festival on the journey to bring For the Birds to Milton Keynes. It's been a great journey with a number of side routes, and it's just wonderful for me, both when we did the local residents preview on Thursday and when I was back there last night, just to now start to feel the comments that are coming back from the audience, and that just, as ever, makes it feel worthwhile. But of course, our biggest thanks must go to the whole team of artists from For the Birds, Mark Anderson, Ulf Pedersen, Pippa Taylor, Kathy Hinde and Jony Easterby. So thank you, and enjoy the rest. I think 9 more days you've got in Milton Keynes, because it takes 9 days to put in and 2 or 3 days to take out, as well as all the days of it being open. And thank you all for coming on a Sunday morning for the first of the Talking Shop Talks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill, as well. And also thank you, Monica, for believing in the show and bringing us here to Milton Keynes, because, we're having a great time.